Hey, are you Adam Graham?
The very same. And this is my old-time radio snack wagon.
Welcome to the Old-Time Radio Snack Wagon, where we serve up a bite-sized portion of old-time radio. And now, here's your Snack Wagon host, Adam Graham.
Today, we're serving up another visit with John Nesbit. If you recall, back in Season 1, we played a monologue by Nesbit, and I mentioned he was in many ways a forerunner to Paul Harvey. This can be felt in many of his early broadcasts, which bore resemblance to Paul Harvey's later news program. While many later passing parades focused on a single story, though those programs were much like the short features he did for film, the first passing parade programs were regular daily or occasionally weekly features chock full of short vignettes, a treasure trove of amazing stories in 15 minutes. We're going to share one of these programs with you. This episode offers a few footnotes about the recently concluded 1936 election, which makes this an appropriate choice to play right now. So here's the passing parade from December 6, 1936.
The Passing Parade, the Duart Company presenting the entertaining and dramatic side of the news with John Nesbit, inviting you to stand with him and view the adventure and romance in The Passing Parade. Duart also presenting the first standard-priced all-purpose beauty cream to be actually made from the oils of fresh dairy milk. Available everywhere you go, the new face cream, Duart's Cream of Milk. Now to John Nesbit.
How do you do, everyone? With the holiday news coming in slowly as always, we found time to check our notes from the month's passing parade on some of the amusing sidelights of the election. Bringing a lot of political gentlemen into view for a last quick glimpse, these people made curious history in the parade of November. The unnamed watch manufacturer, who is now on his way to collect the largest of all election bets, $200,000, which he placed on Mr. Roosevelt. Then there is Mr. Havermeyer of Kansas City. 4 years ago, he swore that if the Democrats got into office, he wouldn't shave until the Republican Party got back into power. True to his oath, for 4 years, this man has let his beard grow. 2 weeks before the elections, he got himself a nice sharp razor, soap and brush, and began counting the days to election. Now he has sadly presented the razor to his brother-in-law, and his wife refuses to speak to him. 2 dead men voted in the national elections. 74-year-old William Boudinot and 79-year-old John Hedquist were close to the divide early in the month. Fearing that they would not live until Election Day, both took out absentee ballots, and both were dead by the time the votes were cast. But legally, they counted. Their last vote. Of all the pre-election prophecies that before the November elections, however, it has finally been decided that Jim Farley's was the most successful of them all. Said Mr. Farley 2 months before, "It's in the bag, boys. It's in the bag." So much for the footnotes to any national election. Here in the passing parade is a man you have never heard of before, but who nevertheless has had his day of fame. Edwin Probst of Dearborn, Michigan, the whistling mailman. Probst found the daily mail-carrying grind monotonous until he learned fancy whistling. Now, as he marches along, he practices trills, bird calls, grand opera selections, and dance tunes, all in exact time to his footsteps. Probst is so punctual on his mail deliveries that the housewives of his section tell the time by his whistling. Most of them like it, but one woman never has. This woman complained to the post office to have the mailman stop. No attention was paid. Complained to Probst himself. He promised to stop whistling as he approached her door. But the other day, the whistling mailman forgot, and so landed himself directly on page 1 of the Dearborn newspapers. For as he approached this unhappy woman's door, trilling merrily, it was flung open. There stood the lonely spinster herself, glaring furiously. "Well," she said, "at least I don't have to listen to that noise any longer. In 10 minutes I'll be dead. Goodbye." The door was slammed hard. The mailman blinked a moment, then went down his way on the street. whistling cheerfully. But 2 blocks away, he suddenly stopped. What if the woman actually meant what she said? Frightened, he started running back toward the house. On the way, he shouted for the neighborhood policeman. The 2 went up and pounded on the door. No answer. They smashed it in. A pungent reek of gas. And on the living room floor, the woman lay unconscious. At the emergency hospital, she was revived. Throughout the city, the whistling mailman was congratulated for having saved a human life. But just the other day, as Probst mounted that same front porch, he was again trying out his trills. Once again, the woman stood before him. You and your whistling. If it hadn't been for that racket you make, I wouldn't have given myself away. Anyway, it's a wonder some people can't mind their own business. The mailman shrugged his shoulders and walked down the road, whistling. A commercial note now for the midway point of the passing parade, and on to a picture of our ghost of the week. Here is a quick and easy way to find out if the cleansing method that you are using is right or wrong for your skin. Just compare your face and neck with the skin on other parts of your own body, your upper arm, for instance. With this simple comparison, you will very likely see that the skin on your face and neck does not look as smooth, fresh, and youthful as it should. If so, then this is a definite proof that the skin of your face and neck lacks vital natural oils. You can soon help to correct this condition by changing from ordinary creams, lotions, and soaps to Duart's Cream of Milk, which is the new type face cream that is actually made from the oils of pure, fresh dairy milk. Cream of Milk will build up the supply of youth-giving oils that are necessary, as you know, to keep the skin soft, smooth, and glowing with youthful freshness. And why does Cream of Milk have this effect? Here is the way a skin specialist would explain the action of this entirely new kind of face cream. Because it is made from milk, Duart's Cream of Milk has a special nourishing quality not found in ordinary creams. Without these oils, the skin is starving, and a starving skin always causes dryness, coarse pores, and the other marks of a poor complexion. Cleanse your skin, but feed it too. Use Duart's Cream of Milk to help replace the lost natural oils, and your skin will regain the soft, smooth, youthful beauty that it should have. Returning to the parade, we're just in time now to catch a glimpse of our ghost of the week. For if ever a shade could return from the great beyond, this gentleman's shade will be hovering over San Francisco Bay this month as the greatest bridge in the world is open to traffic, and thumping his ghostly chest, he must be saying, well, it's about time. Because on a spring morning in 1849, Joshua Norton, sometime to become Emperor of California, wavered down the gangplank of a clipper ship docked at San Francisco and disappeared as he clambered up Telegraph Hill. Joshua Norton didn't bother about going into the foothills for California gold. His stake was a neat little supply store off the square, in which he charged 60 cents apiece for eggs, $50 for a sack of flour, and on bargain days sacrificed a side of bacon for $36.59. In 2 years, Joshua, Scotch Jew and a not unlearned gentleman, was one of San Francisco's wealthiest citizens. In 2 more years, he was a pauper, when a corner on the market which he'd secured was ruined by the unexpected arrival of a shipload of provisions. For 4 years, Joshua disappeared, suddenly turned up again in San Francisco, now looking prosperous, but having a brain in which burned paralytic dementia, that one amazing form of insanity which results from mental strain and leads the victim to imagine that everything he does has stupendous consequences. Everything, as in the Hollywood conferences, is gigantic, terrific, colossal. Joshua appeared wearing a brilliant uniform, enormous epaulets, pinchbeck decorations, a high silk hat with a cluster of turkey feathers in front, his chest covered with medals. Some weeks later, a proclamation appeared in the newspaper, and it was signed, Emperor Norton, Emperor of Upper and Lower California, King of the United States and Protector of Mexico. But San Francisco has one famous quality, a sense of humor, and Joshua Norton was received with universal kindness and even respect. One of the finest artists painted his portrait, catching the strange, commanding glance of the emperor's fine eyes. Norton became a busy man. His proclamations with the red paper seals were always faithfully published in the newspapers. His mandates were issued to every judge at the time that he favored a certain man on trial. Into every hall and meeting place of old San Francisco would come the Emperor Norton, attend the theaters, appear at the finest bars. Although he never had a dime, he had one quality that made him hugely popular. He never outstayed a welcome. He would appear at the most formal official gatherings with great dignity. Once an assembly was called to honor a distinguished visitor, Dom Pedro de Braganza, last ruler of Brazil. The city fathers forgot to invite Norton, but, dressed magnificently, he came anyway. He appeared at the top of the theater aisle, marched down the center passage, mounted the speaker's platform, and took the seat of honor in the middle. The audience was silent for a moment, but not a snicker was heard. Then, to a man, it arose and bowed deeply to the emperor. Eyes flashing, the uniformed gatecrasher stood up, saluted his people, and with that grain of common sense that he had retained, left the theater. Emperor Norton seldom had to buy a drink or a meal, and seats were reserved for him by the management of every theater in town. He never borrowed a dollar, but he did have the habit of writing out small checks, taking them to banks, and demanding payment at once. Though he had no checking accounts, invariably, with a secret smile, the bankers would cash them at once. But at the end of his life, dark days came, for one morning the news of the death of Napoleon III reached San Francisco, and Norton said he was heartbroken. Remarking that he was a close relative of Napoleon, he put on mourning and for a year remained silent in grief. Today in San Francisco there is a building named after this strange man. It is Emperor Norton Hall. But the most interesting reminder of him lies in the vast mass of steel and cable crossing San Francisco Bay, which was this month opened to the world. For back in the 50s, it was Emperor Norton, no less, whose greatest dream was the building of a bridge that was to someday span the bay. He was the first man to have the idea, and his proclamations demanding it appeared everywhere. Emperor Norton couldn't understand why we disobeyed him and didn't rush right out and toss a bridge across the bay. Every living engineer of his day would have shouted, "Impossible!" So that surely this month, when the madman's dream actually did come true, the shade of Emperor Norton, Emperor of California, King of the United States, Protector of Mexico, must have chuckled to itself and muttered, "Well, I see they got around to obeying their emperor after all." And that is why, if we had anything to do with it, we would have only one name for this world's greatest structure which spans San Francisco Bay, the Emperor's Bridge. It has a nice sound anyway. Finally, in the parade of today, the spotlight falls upon a young Italian named Carlo Mattetti, who now begins a prison sentence for life at hard labor. The reason Carlo Mattetti will never find freedom again lies in a mistake he made which sounds like the end of an old O. Henry yarn, but which is an absolute fact. For Carlo Mattetti was a thief, a scoundrel, and a forger, living in the quaint old city of Milan. Loafing about town, Carlo used to pass frequently by a certain old house where lived a recluse named Peter Santo. Carlo had heard rumors that Santo kept a fortune hidden away in his house. Knowing that Santo lived alone, young Carlo spent many months planning to get that hidden money without having to pay the penalty for burglary. He'd finally made up his mind to kill the old man when one day the gossips of the town began speaking of a serious quarrel that Santo had had with his nephew. Instantly, Carlo saw the way to carry out his plan. That night, he crept into the house, mercilessly slaughtered the old man as he slept, then sat down and wrote a note, forging the handwriting of old Santo from a signature he found on a paper in the desk. The note read, "To whom it may concern, in the event that I, Peter Santo, should be killed, I wish an investigation of my nephew made, for we have quarreled seriously, and I am afraid of him." Carlo folded up the letter and put it into a drawer, got the hoarded gold, and escaped in the darkness. Next day, when the deed was discovered, the whole neighborhood flocked to the house. To avoid suspicion, the clever Carlo went too. A detective had found the incriminating letter and was looking at it. Carlo suddenly got worried to hear the detective remark, "Why, this must be a forgery." "No," said Carlo, "it isn't. Peter Santo called me in from the street just yesterday afternoon to witness that letter. I refused to have anything to do with it, but I saw him writing it myself." The detective looked at Carlo for a moment, then slowly shook his head. "Carlo Mattetti, I arrest you for the murder of Peter Santo, for old Santo only learned how to write one word in his whole life, and that was his signature." Quickly now to Doris Dumont before we close this edition of The Passing Parade.
If you are planning to get a permanent wave this week, I know there are several things you are hoping for. You want a wave that will leave your hair soft and lustrous, full of life. You want a wave that has a natural look to it. And, of course, you want one that will last you a reasonable time. And this is exactly the kind of wave you will get if you just remember to tell your hairdresser to wave your hair by the genuine Duart method. Beauty experts all over America recommend Duart waves. And in Hollywood, Duart is the only permanent waving method officially endorsed by the famous Motion Picture Hairstylists Guild. Ask for a Duart permanent wave.
Until you join us again on this radio reviewing stand to seek out the stories behind the people of the passing parade, this is John Nesbit saying goodbye to you all.
Duart's Cream of Milk, the new kind of face cream made from the oils of pure, fresh dairy milk, is on sale at all beauty shops, drugstores, and department stores. It comes in 3 generous sizes at 50 cents, $1, and $2. Also, an introductory junior size is to be found at all 5 and 10 cent stores. Try this new type face cream, Duart's Cream of Milk, and convince yourself.
Welcome back. The election notes were kind of intriguing. The 1936 election was one of the all-time electoral vote blowouts. FDR won 46 of 46 states for a total of 523 electoral votes to 8 for Governor Alf Landon of Kansas, with Landon only winning Maine and Vermont. This was the first of 3 times that a presidential candidate cleared 500 electoral votes. So you might wonder how someone could win a big overseas bet on the 1936 election. Well, there was a strong indication that led some people to think Landon was going to win, and that was a poll done by the magazine called The Literary Journal. They sent out a form to their 10 million readers. 2.8 million returned the form, and they projected Alf Landon to win 370 electoral votes. Of course, this poll was flawed and predictive of nothing, but it did create the opportunity for at least one guy to get good enough odds to make some serious money on an election bet. As to the guy who had to keep his beard because FDR won, in 1932, he chose a bad year to pledge to keep his beard if he didn't want to have a beard. Democrats won in 1932 and wouldn't lose another election until 1952. So if he kept to his guns, he ended up in it for the long haul. I honestly don't get it as a form of protest or political speech, because FDR nor anyone else cared that he grew a beard. The only one made miserable by this sort of protest was him and his wife. So, yeah, I don't get it. The whistling mailman story was great. I liked how he found a way to be happy in a job that he didn't initially find pleasant, but that this one person didn't like it. And you get the feeling that whatever the source of her unhappiness, the postman wasn't really part of it, just more suffering as a result of it. The Emperor Norton story is one of those that any good book of American historical oddities is incomplete without. I learned of Emperor Norton from such a book when I was a boy. I think it's safe to say that it's a story that probably only could have happened in San Francisco. It helped that he was harmless, charming, and promoted positive things like attending the San Francisco Opera. There's actually a nonprofit called the Emperor Norton Trust that has been working to have him honored and to work to promote his legacy. A few years back, 6,700 people signed a petition to name the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge after Norton, although the trust has moved on to trying to have the clock tower of the San Francisco Ferry Building named after Emperor Norton. There was a little bit of everything in today's episode, with some really delightful and engaging told by a master storyteller. As always, I look forward to visiting John Nesbit again and finding out what he has to share from the passing parade. It's time for me to close up the old snack wagon, but don't worry, we'll be back with another serving of old-time radio goodness before you know it. If you want to enjoy some of our longer-form podcasts, you can feast away at my website at greatdetectives.net. Your emails are also welcome at adam@snackwagon.net.
The Old Time Radio Snack Wagon comes to you from Boise, Idaho. Your host is Adam Graham. Sound production is by Rhines Media, LLC. You can listen to past episodes of the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon as well as connect on social media at our website at snackwagon.net. Email suggestions for episodes to adam@snackwagon.net. This has been the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon.
Until next time, goodbye.